Your glutes lose strength fast after 50, but these 6 exercises prevent that. After 50 years old, there is a silent process happening in your body. Your glutes, which are the largest muscles in the human body, begin to weaken at an accelerated rate. This is not fate, it is a warning. And in this video, you will discover the 7 exercises that stop this process and still leave you stronger, more stable, and with less pain than before. Before we get started, please leave a comment below with your name and the city where you are watching our content from. We would love to know. Exercise number 1. Elevated foot glute bridge. Few people know this, but the gluteus maximus is literally the largest muscle in the human body, and yet it is one of the most neglected muscles after 50 years old. The explanation for this has a technical name: gluteal amnesia. Over time, especially in people who spend many hours sitting, the central nervous system begins to forget how to activate these muscles efficiently. The glute stops being the primary driver of movement, and other muscles, such as the lower back and the hamstrings, take over work that is not theirs to do. The result? Chronic lower back pain, hip instability, and progressive loss of functional strength. The elevated foot variation exists precisely to correct this. By resting your feet on a bench, box, or sturdy step, you increase the range of motion of the exercise. This means the glute needs to work at a greater muscle length, which intensifies the recruitment of fibers in the upper portion of the gluteus maximus. It is a small technical detail that makes a significant difference in results. To perform the exercise, lie on your back on the floor and place your heels on an elevated surface between 12 and 16 inches high. Your knees should form an angle of approximately 90 degrees. Press your heels into the surface and push your hips upward, forming a straight line between your knees, hips, and shoulders at the top of the movement. Hold the contraction for 2 seconds at the highest point before lowering. The descent should be controlled, not a collapse. A very common mistake is allowing the knees to flare outward or cave inward during the movement. This indicates that the hip stabilizers are weak. If this happens to you, place a resistance band above your knees to provide constant feedback throughout the set. Another frequent mistake is using the lower back to compensate. You will notice this if you feel the burn more in your back than in your glutes. In that case, reduce the range of motion and focus on consciously squeezing the glute at the top of the movement. To start, I recommend 3 sets of 10 to 12 repetitions, with a 2-second pause at the top. As your control improves, progress to 4 sets of 12 to 15 repetitions. If you experience any knee pain when resting your feet on an elevated surface, perform the floor version first, prioritizing the quality of the contraction. People with a history of lumbar disc herniation should pay special attention to pelvic positioning during the movement. Speak with your physical therapist before starting if you feel any discomfort in the spine. Exercise number 2, bird dog. The name may sound strange, but this exercise has a function that very few people can replace with anything else. It simultaneously trains the glute, the core, and the deep spinal stabilizers, all in a single low-impact movement. For anyone over 50 years old, that combination is extremely valuable. The logic behind it is simple. When you extend the opposite arm and leg at the same time from a quadruped position, you create an intentional imbalance that the body needs to compensate for. That compensation is performed by the deepest stabilizing muscles, including the gluteus medius, the spinal erectors, and the transverse abdominis. These muscles are rarely activated with quality in traditional exercises. To perform the exercise, position yourself on all fours with your hands directly below your shoulders and your knees below your hips. Before anything else, find a neutral spine position without excessive arching or rounding. Now, in a slow and controlled manner, extend your right arm forward and your left leg backward at the same time. The goal is to keep the pelvis completely still without any rotation. Hold for 2 seconds and return with control. Alternate sides. The most common mistake in this exercise is exactly the hip rotation. Most people lift the leg and automatically rotate the pelvis to the side, which completely removes the work from the gluteus medius and the deep stabilizers. You will know you are doing it correctly when you feel a subtle but steady effort on the side of the hip and in the lower back area without pain. To help with correct execution, imagine you have a full glass of water resting on your back. The mission is to not spill a single drop during the movement. I recommend starting with 3 sets of 8 repetitions per side, focusing entirely on stability. As your control improves, move to 10 to 12 repetitions per side. People with wrist problems can use dumbbells or yoga blocks as support to reduce the pressure. Relevant contraindication: if you have shoulder impingement syndrome or active shoulder bursitis, extending the arm may cause discomfort. In that case, perform the variation using only the legs, keeping both arms supported on the floor. Before we continue, if you're over 50, take a look at this statistic. According to the WHO, between 28 and 35% of people over 65 suffer at least one fall each year. More than 70% of these falls happen inside the home. And today, falls are the leading cause of loss of independence among older adults worldwide. Many people blame it on bad luck, but in reality, it comes down to a lack of strength, balance, mobility, and physical preparedness. That's why our team created biological armor, a complete protocol for people in their 50s, 60s, or 70s who want to make sure they never go through that. Inside the protocol, you'll get a special home exercise program designed to build functional strength, real balance, and reverse years of poor posture and physical neglect without damaging your joints. You'll also learn the habits scientists have identified as common among the populations with the highest life expectancy in the world, habits that less than 1% of the Western population actually practices. Access it now by clicking the pinned link in the first comment of this video, or by pointing your phone's camera at the code appearing on the screen. Exercise number 3, Sumo squat. The conventional squat is excellent, but after 50 years old, one factor begins to change the equation: hip mobility. Many people in this age group develop restrictions in internal hip rotation, which makes squatting with parallel feet uncomfortable or technically compromised. The sumo squat solves this elegantly. With your feet significantly wider than shoulder width apart and your toes pointing outward at an angle of approximately 45 degrees, you naturally respect hip mobility while also recruiting the gluteus maximus and the adductors with much greater intensity. It is an exercise that accomplishes more with a joint that demands less. Glute recruitment in the sumo squat is notably superior to that of the conventional squat precisely because of the hip opening angle. This is especially relevant for the lower portion of the gluteus maximus, a region that tends to be underutilized in traditional hip extension movements. To perform the exercise, stand with your feet wider than your shoulders and your toes turned outward. Keep your torso upright and descend in a controlled manner, pushing your knees outward in the direction of your toes. Lower yourself as far as your mobility allows without losing vertical alignment in the torso. When rising, think about pushing the floor down and actively squeezing your glutes. You can use your own body weight, a dumbbell held with both hands at chest height, or a kettlebell. For beginners, holding the back of a chair during the first few sessions helps a great deal with confidence and movement mechanics. A mistake I see many people make is allowing their knees to collapse inward during the upward phase. This is a sign of hip abductor weakness. A resistance band above the knees, just like in the bridge exercise, helps correct this pattern. Start with 3 sets of 10 to 12 repetitions. As you gain strength and confidence, progress to 4 sets of 12 to 15 repetitions. People with a hip replacement should consult their orthopedic surgeon before including any squat variation with wide hip opening in their routine. Exercise number 4, step up. There is a reason physical therapists love this exercise. The step up mimics one of the most functional movement patterns in real life: climbing a step, getting into a car, rising from a lower surface. After 50 years old, the loss of unilateral glute strength is one of the biggest contributors to falls and instability. And that is exactly the deficit the step-up addresses. By working one leg at a time, you eliminate the compensation the body naturally makes in bilateral exercises. In most people, the dominant side takes on part of the work from the weaker side. With the step-up, each glute is forced to work on its own and any imbalance becomes immediately evident. An important piece of information: biomechanics studies show that the full leg step-up generates a peak activation of the gluteus maximus comparable to that of the leg press, but with far less compressive load on the spine. For people with a history of lower back pain, this represents a significant advantage. To perform the exercise, stand in front of a bench, box, or sturdy step with a height between 8 and 12 inches. Place one foot completely on the surface with the heel firmly supported. Push through the heel to step up, without using the lower leg to assist. At the top, stand fully on one leg for 1 second and descend in a controlled manner. This descending phase, the eccentric phase, is where much of the muscular stimulus occurs. The most common mistake is pushing off with the foot on the floor to help with the ascent. This defeats the purpose of the exercise. If this happens, lower the surface height until you can perform the pure movement using only the leg on the step. Start with 3 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions per leg. When the movement feels stable and controlled, increase to 12 repetitions or add a light load in your hands. People with patellar chondropathy or anterior knee pain should pay special attention to knee alignment during the movement. Before we continue, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Having constant access to science-based information is what will help you progress with long-term health in the world of exercise. Exercise number 5, frog pump. This is probably the least known of the 7 exercises, but also one of the most intelligent for anyone over 50 years old. The frog pump works the glute in a position of external hip rotation, which means it recruits fibers that are completely inaccessible to exercises performed in a neutral position, such as the conventional glute bridge. The position of the exercise loosely resembles the posture of a frog, lying face down with the knees bent and the soles of the feet together or slightly apart, forming a diamond shape with the legs. From this position, you lift your knees off the floor while keeping your feet together, squeezing the glute as hard as possible. This is particularly effective for the upper and lateral portion of the gluteus maximus, a region that becomes compromised in people with piriformis syndrome, which is a very common condition after 50 years old that causes pain in the gluteal area and radiates down the back of the thigh. To perform the exercise, lie face down with your knees bent and the soles of your feet together. Keep your core slightly engaged to protect the lower back. From this position, lift your knees off the floor as high as you can while keeping the soles of your feet together. Hold for 2 seconds at the highest point and lower with control. The movement may look small, but the burn in the glutes appears quickly. A common mistake is compensating with the lower back by excessively arching the spine during the lift. If you feel pressure or pain in the lower back region, reduce the range of motion and focus on using only the glute for the movement. For beginners, start with 3 sets of 10 to 12 repetitions. As you gain control, progress to 15 repetitions or add a small ankle weight. People with lumbar disc protrusion or pain when lying face down should avoid this exercise and prioritize the other ones on the list. Exercise number 6, donkey kick. The donkey kick is by far the most direct exercise on the list when it comes to isolating the gluteus maximus. There are no other large muscles trying to take center stage. There is no load transfer to the spine. It is the gluteus maximus in pure action, and that is why it is so valuable within a routine for people over 50 years old. The function of the gluteus maximus that this exercise specifically trains is hip extension. In other words, it is the same movement you use to rise from a chair, climb a step, or get up from the floor. Training this pattern in isolation reconnects the nervous system to the glute in a way that compound exercises often cannot, especially in people who have gone years without training. To perform the exercise, position yourself on all fours with your hands directly below your shoulders and your knees below your hips. Keep your spine neutral. From this position, drive one heel toward the ceiling, keeping the knee bent at 90 degrees. The movement is a hip extension. Bring the heel up to hip level or slightly above depending on your mobility. Hold for 2 seconds at the top and lower with control. Think of the movement as if you were trying to push the ceiling with your heel. This helps activate more fibers of the gluteus maximus than simply thinking about lifting the leg. A very frequent mistake is raising the leg too high, reaching a point where the lower back arches to compensate. This removes the work from the glute and places excessive tension on the lumbar spine. Prioritize the quality of the contraction at the top, not the height achieved. Another mistake is bending the elbows or allowing the shoulders to sink during the movement. Keep the arms firm and the shoulders stable throughout the entire set. Start with 3 sets of 12 repetitions per side. As muscular control improves, progress to 15 repetitions or add a resistance band above the knee to increase resistance. People with shoulder impingement syndrome or wrist instability may find the floor support difficult. In that case, it is possible to perform the variation with the forearms resting on the floor instead of the hands, reducing pressure on the upper joints. Bonus exercise, seated band hip abduction. We have reached the last exercise, and it has a very specific focus, the gluteus medius. This muscle sits on the side of the hip and is the primary muscle responsible for stabilizing the pelvis during walking, climbing stairs, and any other single leg movement. After 50 years old, weakening of the gluteus medius is one of the main contributors to an unstable gait and to an increased risk of falls. Here's an important concept. Unlike the gluteus maximus, which works in hip extension, the gluteus medius works primarily in abduction, which is the movement of the thigh away from the central axis of the body. Exercises that do not specifically include this movement pattern leave the gluteus medius completely out of the equation, and many routines, even well-designed ones, make this mistake. The seated band version has an advantage over the standing version. It eliminates the influence of the trunk muscles and balance, placing all the resistance directly on the gluteus medius. For people who have difficulty with balance or are returning to exercise after a period of inactivity, this is a safer and equally effective way to recruit the target muscle. To perform the exercise, sit on the edge of a firm chair or bench with a resistance band positioned just above your knees. Keep your feet flat on the floor with your knees bent at approximately 90 degrees. Lean your torso slightly forward, resting your hands on your knees. From this position, push your knees apart against the resistance of the band, spreading them as wide as you can. Hold for 2 seconds and return in a controlled manner. The key here is to not let your knees snap back quickly to the starting position. The controlled return phase is just as important as the opening, because that is where the muscle works eccentrically and receives an additional strengthening stimulus. A mistake I see many people make in this exercise is tilting the torso to the side during the abduction, trying to compensate with the quadratus lumborum. Keep the torso stable and let the work happen exclusively at the lateral hip. To begin, use a light resistance band and perform 3 sets of 15 to 20 repetitions. As you feel your control improving and the lateral hip burn during the final repetitions, progress to a medium resistance band or increase to 25 repetitions. People with a total hip replacement should check with their orthopedic surgeon about any restrictions on hip abduction before including this exercise. These 7 exercises, when practiced regularly, form a solid foundation for keeping the glutes active, strong, and functional well beyond 50 years old. It's not necessary to do all of them at once. You can distribute these movements throughout the week, combining 2 or 3 per session, so that the glutes receive frequent stimulus without overload. The most important thing is consistency. Regular practitioners who include glute-specific exercises 2 to 3 times per week show measurable improvements in balance, functional strength, and reduction of lower back pain in less than 8 weeks. If you want to check out the best isometric leg exercises that can be done at home, we have a video appearing on screen right now showing each one of them in detail. Go check it out, and do not forget to also look into our biological shielding protocol. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and may God bless you, my friend.